Hello, I'm William Gallagher, coming to you from a windy and a secret, undisclosed. Haven't? Right, sorry, hang on. That it? Okay, right. So, hello, I'm William Gallagher, coming to you from a very cold, secret, undisclosed location. You'd never know where it is. This is 58 Keys, which, as ever, as always, is for writers. Writers like you and me who use and who write on Macs and iPhones and iPads. But slightly unusually this time, I kind of want to be a bit careful how I say things, because this is a shallow dive, more a glancing blow, sort of gentle touch, how many ways can I keep saying that, into shadow libraries, the deep web and the dark web. Just as writers, I think it's interesting why there is a deep web. This thing where it's said that there's 90% more online than what you might call the regular web, for want of a better word. I think it's predictable that there would be a dark web too, okay? And I know that if you think AI has ripped off writers by training on our work, well, I just tried this out and I found a free copy of one of my own books on all of these services we're going to talk about. It was oddly startling. Now, I'm obviously never going to recommend stealing the work of other writers, because that's what it is. It's stealing, and that's what we are. We are writers. Also, because they're writers, you're expecting a but there, you know, the rhythm of it, but, well, there it was. Yet, knowing what's out there, understanding why there are these tiers of web, the ordinary web, the deep web, and the dark web. Listen to my voice there. I think that's just interesting for us. Everything is interesting for writers. Except football. Look, obviously, don't use shadow libraries, don't risk going into the dark web, but here's what they are, as far as I've been pretty gingerly actually looking at and starting off. Let's go with the deep web first, because actually that one, totally fine. In fact, you already use it possibly every day. People mix up the deep and the dark web, or maybe it's just me, but there are similarities, I suppose. The deep web, though, first, it is the one that's variously said to be 500 times bigger than the regular or surface web, between, like I said, 90% or maybe even 95% of everything on the web. You and I are writers, so obviously that means we're readers, and actually it very often means we're also researchers. We look for information for ourselves, for our characters, especially when we should be writing. So naturally, knowing that there is this 95% more on the web than we usually see, of course we want to know. The thing is, like I say, you already do know. You just might not happen to call it the deep web because there's no real reason to. Example, say you want to look up a word on the Oxford English Dictionary, the OED. There are exceptions to this, but broadly, while you can Google the phrase Oxford English Dictionary or OED, you can't Google the definition of a particular word in it. Google can see the front page, the front door, really, of OED.com. That's on the regular, the surface, the ordinary web, and you can find it very easily. But the actual dictionary data, that's in a database that is on the OED's own systems, and the OED will search that when you go to the front door and you ask them to and possibly pay. The definitions database, that is the deep web. Deep web is anything online that can't or isn't accessed by Google or other search engines. Netflix, good example. Another one, Netflix. You can find Netflix with a Google search. You can find netflix.com easily enough, or actually, especially if you know Google sort of search criteria, you could enter the phrase, nobody wants this, site:/netflix.com. And that will get you pages. Initially, the first set will be about pages to do with that excellent show, and the rest will be adverts. What you will not get through that Google search is the show itself. Any of those links will then, you go through them and then it will take you to Netflix and then you can go to the show, but none of those links, none of those videos are visible in the Google search. I have a feeling you're looking at me. Yes, Google offers you a video tab in its search results, but don't click on it. I was quite surprised what I found. Normally I use it, but this time, yeah, not so much. Anyway, the deep web is fine. I mean, it's even good. It's not in any way something to be concerned about. as you might be with the dark web or shadow archives. What this is for me, the deep web, it's a research tool, but one that we need to think about in a slightly different way. So rather than searching for the answer to something, to some question, we need to think of searching for where that answer is most likely to be. So rather than searching for the definition for a word, the definition for a word will be in the OED. So first we search for the OED or something like it. And then we keep very good notes. Some of these sites can be so hard to find, but if they are, then what's even harder is finding them again. So, dark web in the windy sunshine. Call me a wimp, right? Because I am, but I'm anxious about the dark web. You hear all these stories about drug dealing, weapon sales, and I mean, staggeringly profoundly foul pornography on the dark web. And I believe the stories are true. With my cold sort of writer, producer, journalist head on, I think it's fascinating that it exists. I mean, as a man, I think it's overwhelmingly abhorrent, unstoppably abhorrent. But also as a writer, surprisingly dull and empty, at least as far as I went. Now, I mean, I was never going to go far. I was never going to buy a gun online. That sounds like I was never going to buy a gun in any way, but you know what I mean. My first thought, right, as I dipped a toe into all of this, was that I don't want that toe bitten off. So before I did anything, for anything else, and actually I'll tell you now, I think you'll be disappointed with what I find. You might dig further. In fact, actually, if you know and use the dark web already, I've got nothing for you here. Bits for us as writers, though. Well, I did two things first. First, I installed a VPN to disguise my internet traffic. VPN's used for a few things, but in this case, I wanted some sense of security. I wanted traffic back and forth encrypted between my MacBook and the sites I was going to. And then I installed a Tor browser, Tor. In fact, I used the one called Tor browser. That's the official Tor browser. And without it, you're not going anywhere on the dark web. There are many other ones, but regular browsers, though, will not find or connect to sites on the dark web. And these sites are all .onion ones, which I thought was a joke. I thought that was to do with The Onion, satirical news site, but no. Apparently it's a reference to layers upon layers of security that are unpeeled by these encrypted browsers. I mean, yeah, I don't know that I trust any of the layers. That could be me. Anyway, all of this might be okay because it turns out that there is, well, I think close to bugger all to see on the dark web, unless you're willing to follow some particularly deep rabbit holes down there and at some point in it are willing to hand over money to total strangers. I mean, I have doubts giving money to Amazon. So, yeah, I freely admit my searching the dark web was a bit blunted. Though I'm not altogether unhappy at not having stumbled into some of this stuff. I've only dug around for a couple of hours or so, and really frustrating, I kept finding indexes to sites where things were apparently going on, but most of those indexes didn't work. The entries would be out of date, just not maintained the whole site in some way. They were like this big guide to what used to be around and easy to get to. I think it's still around, it's just harder to get to, and I couldn't. I don't believe that the dark web has lightened up. I believe I'm just rubbish at finding my way around it. Let's go with that. If you wanted me to show you how exactly to find all the horrible stuff, well, it's over there, that away, somewhere, with a VPN and a Tor browser and a stronger stomach than I have. But I did find one thing quite often. I found repositories of stolen books. That's not how they describe themselves, but that's what they were, that's what they are. And while they were there on the dark web, as it turns out, you don't have to go into that to find some of them. They're all called shadow libraries. And for those, all you need are their web addresses. Getting their web addresses, that can be slightly harder than you think, except sometimes when I check Wikipedia, well, it always maintains a list of them. and just searching for shadow libraries in Wikipedia, well, when I looked last time just to check for you where it was, there wasn't a set of links. There were just descriptions of them, but you can find them. And I know I found links in there. Even if you find a shadow library, right, it is actually possible that a Google search for it or entering the address directly will not work. For example, there's one called Anna's Archive, which I believed was gone, taken off, whatever, because it couldn't be found. But then I forgot to switch off my VPN after searching the dark web, and Anna's Archive site was loaded on my screen. It was such a jolt. I quit the Tor browser, right, went back to Safari, and there it was, loaded. Another one I've lost track of the name, is definitely gone, regardless of using a VPN or whatever, because it was successfully taken down after legal action, and quite right too. These are all illegal. A shadow library is not a library, since you're not borrowing books from the writers on there, you're stealing them. It's also actually not even a shadow thing, really, because it's just there. That word is more akin to, it's how Britain uses shadow in terms of government. We have the government, the current party in power, and that has a cabinet with ministers who don't do anything. The opposition party has a shadow cabinet with ministers that can't do anything. But I have found one use for shadow libraries that I think is legitimate, and one that I know isn't, but since it was about me, I feel kind of okay telling you. The legitimate use first. I have searched shadow libraries to find books on subjects that I am researching. I do that the same way I do on Amazon, right? But shadow libraries, they seem to have an even bigger catalogue, is that the word? A library than Amazon, just huge. So twice, in fact, now in the last couple of months, I've turned up details of something I think I would otherwise not have found. Nothing vital, nothing important, but I wouldn't have got them. And since what I got was the title and the author name, and in one case also the publisher, I was then able to do a properly legitimate search on things like ABE books and eBay and buy the books directly. But it is true, I could have downloaded illegal copies, of at least some of them, from those shadow libraries. And I can prove that, I can show you that, because this is the one about me. I searched for my first ever book, a non-fiction one for the British Film Institute called BFI TV Classics, The Beiderbecke Affair. And there it is, right there. The Tor browser, incidentally, I was looking at this on a regular browser, but it reminds me the Tor browser warned me at one point about downloading anything from the dark web. It cautioned me that, once you download it, if you turn off your VPN, once you're out of the Tor browser, if you then launch whatever it is you downloaded, well, then it might have code in it that could connect to the internet and it download malware, for example, viruses or that kind of thing. I was already twitchy about it. Why does anyone use this stuff? Anyway, I was already wary about downloading even my own book from these shadow libraries, but the file format seemed to be PDF. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but that seemed safe enough. So I did. And the thing that's really puzzling me, it's PDF. This is my book. It is a perfect PDF of the paperback book. But I cannot fathom how a shadow library got it. I have a PDF copy of my book, but it's the proofreading PDF, the one my copy editor sent me years ago to mark up and change. This PDF is the final, corrected, finished book. And I did not even know that there was a PDF version. Anyway, as a writer, you know that your work has been gobbled up by countless AI companies who don't understand copyright and have no interest in livelihoods, or at least they don't until their own copyright is being stolen and their own livelihood is being threatened. But it's another thing altogether to find your work actually right there, not, passed and trained on, but readable straight away. If it's helped a writer find that a book exists, and then they've popped off to, in my case, the British Film Institute to buy it, well, okay. But that isn't what happens. So shadow libraries, right, are good research tools for finding the existence of good research sources, I suppose. But I feel both generous and maybe foolish saying that. I mean, it's true, but this is our work being stolen. And there's one more thing. In case you, like the people who run these shadow libraries, think that all writing should be available to everyone. I mean, it's a very laudable thought, but shadow libraries run adverts. Really irritating adverts too. They're ones where you click a link to go to a section and it might take you to that section, but it might instead take you off to an advertiser site somewhere. Yeah, just constant misdirection to get money. All of the advertising makes money for the shadow libraries, and I imagine they would tell you that, well, it costs money, doesn't it? It takes money and it takes people's time to run the servers and the sites for these libraries. All of this work, you know, William, doesn't come free. Yeah, I know. But anyway, if I do feel foolish about the shadow libraries and their worth, as well as annoyed and affronted, as right, all sorts of things here, then I also do, I gotta say, I feel a bit inadequate talking to you about the dark web. You now know what I know, which is how to get to it. You know that I found it boring and empty. But if you're willing to risk your money, it's your risk. There are countless illegal ways to spend money and do things on there that, yeah, maybe that's something that a character you're writing about would need to know. Just don't give your character your credit card number or your IP address. And remember, the deep web is fine. The deep web is normal, it's good, really. It takes a different mindset for us when you're researching something. This business of not looking for what you want to know, looking instead for where that information could be. I like that subtle difference there. Anyway, that's it for this edition of 58 Keys from the Secret Undisclosed Location. Take care of yourself, okay, especially on the dark web, and I'll see you soon.